The Space Shuttle, like a page out of science fiction. This was the world's first true spaceship. And on this September day in 1976, thousands cheered as she made her first appearance. Star Trek fans demanded that she be named the Enterprise. So Enterprise she was. With this event, a new era in space had begun. In 1977, Enterprise was set free, gliding to a perfect landing in the California desert. But Enterprise was only a test model, a metal shell. Ahead lay a long, hard road before the first true space shuttle would reach for the sky. In 1981, Columbia made its way to the launching pad after many technical delays. The space shuttle was 3 years behind schedule and way over budget. Now this new machine faced an uphill battle to prove itself. This was the first reusable spacecraft. 3 liquid fuel engines were built into the tail. On the sides, 2 powerful solid fuel boosters would parachute back to the sea. The only part that would not be recovered was the large liquid fuel tank in the rear. Now, would everything work? The moment of truth was at hand.
We've gone for main engine start.
With 6.5 million pounds of thrust, Columbia roared into the sky, with John Young and Bob Crippen at the controls.
Stop barrel program. Go. Roger, roll.
At 17,000 miles an hour, Columbia was now circling the Earth once every 90 minutes. Here, 150 miles up, was a new world, a world without air or sound, where objects can boil or freeze, where nothing has weight. Into this hostile world, man brought his own home. And what a home! John Young had flown the crowded Gemini in Apollo capsules. Now he had a kitchen, a bathroom, and living quarters designed for 7 people. Here, Young is making his lunch. After 3 days, Columbia was sent plunging back to Earth. Would she survive her scorching trip through the atmosphere? And there she was. The ship's 30,000 permanent heat tiles had done their job.
Welcome home, Columbia. Beautiful, beautiful.
A perfect landing on the desert floor at Edwards Air Force Base, California. From rocket to orbiting spaceship to glider, this was truly a magnificent machine.
This is the world's greatest all-electric flying machine, I'll tell you that. It was super.
Back at Cape Canaveral, Columbia was readied for the next flight. It was here on the ground that the shuttle faced its biggest challenge. In the future, America's space program would depend on getting the ship back to the launching pad quickly. That goal would be a difficult one to reach.
We have ignition. We have ignition of the solid rocket boosters and liftoff. Liftoff of America's space shuttle, and the space shuttle has cleared the tower.
Columbia's second test flight was 7 months later. For those on the ground, a spectacular sight. For astronauts Joe Engle and Richard Truly, a perfect ride into space.
Five, 3, touchdown. Welcome home. Thank you, Chase.
Technical problems brought the shuttle down a few days early, but the landing was flawless. Like the first flight, only a few of the 30,000 heat tiles were damaged. The trip was a success. Slowly but surely, the shuttle program was moving ahead. Almost a year after the first flight, Columbia made its third trip into space in March of 1982. Canada built this large arm to take objects out of the bay or put them back in by remote control. The arm was tested, and it worked perfectly. On the 4th of July, 1982, a brand new space shuttle, Challenger, was on its way to Florida to get ready for its first mission. Soon there would be 4 space shuttles. On this same day, Columbia finished her 4th and final test flight. 4 months later, Columbia was launched on her first operational mission. On the flight deck, astronauts William Lenoir and Vance Brand. The goal was to prove that the shuttle was ready to get down to business and start doing important work in space. As it turned out, there was a good reason to be happy. Inside the cargo bay were 2 communications satellites. These satellites would have to go 22,000 miles up, so a booster rocket was attached to each one. Here, a satellite is spinning out of the cargo bay. Minutes later, the booster was fired, and the satellite reached a perfect orbit.
Liftoff of the orbiter Challenger and the 6th flight of the space shuttle. The shuttle has cleared the tower.
Challenger's underway. We got a road program.
The next flight came 5 months later. A fuel leak inside Challenger caused a major delay. But in April 1983, Challenger roared into the sky on her maiden voyage.
A period of maximum aerodynamic pressure.
Astronauts ventured outside the shuttle for the very first time. Story Musgrave and Donald Peterson practiced working in the cargo bay, wearing their new shuttle spacesuits. This important first step paved the way for man's challenging future in the vacuum of space.
A little deeper pool, and I've been used to working in. It's a fantastic view.
In June 1983, Sally Ride was the first female American astronaut to journey into space. She was one of 3 mission specialists on board. While the commander and pilot flew the shuttle, the specialists operated equipment and carried out experiments. Here was proof that women were ready to take their place alongside men in this new frontier. And here was the first actual photograph of the shuttle in orbit. It was taken by a camera mounted on a satellite that was sent drifting a few hundred feet away. Now we could truly appreciate this amazing ship of space. With its 60-foot-long cargo bay, it can haul 32 tons into orbit. On this flight, it carried 2 more satellites. Flight number 8 brought the first night liftoff. Those who witnessed this spectacular sight will never forget it. Suddenly, the dark Florida sky was ablaze with a false dawn as Challenger rose majestically on a fiery column of flame. The flight ended with the first night landing at Edwards Air Force Base. So far, the shuttle had carried many small experiments, but here was an entire laboratory filling the cargo bay. This was Spacelab, built by the European Space Agency. 2 astronauts and 2 scientists, including one from West Germany, studied the Earth, the atmosphere, the sun, and the stars. They also tested themselves to learn more about man's adjustment to weightlessness, and they studied matter to see how it behaves without gravity. The 10-day mission was a big success, gathering an enormous amount of scientific data. After returning to Earth, the Spacelab could now be taken apart and reassembled with different instruments for the next trip. The first mission of 1984 brought one of the most unforgettable events in space history. Here was Spaceship Man, floating free among the stars. It looked like a scene from a science fiction movie. But this jet backpack was real indeed. At the push of a button, the astronaut could steer himself around in space with bursts of nitrogen gas. Bruce McCandless was the first to try out this manned maneuvering unit, and rightfully so. For most of his 18 years as an astronaut, he helped develop and test the unit. Now the big moment was finally at hand. As he drifted 300 feet away from the shuttle, McCandless had become a human satellite, circling the Earth on his own.
The view is simply spectacular and panoramic, and we believe that we're literally opening a new frontier in what man can do in space, and we'll be paving the way for many important operations on the coming space station, sir.
Well, that is just great. You've really opened a new era for the world in space with this mission.
Then it was Robert Stewart's turn. This was an important test. On the next mission, a daring attempt would be made to rescue and repair a broken satellite called Solar Max. An astronaut would use this backpack to try and capture the satellite. Here, Bruce McCandless uses the cargo arm as a work platform, rehearsing for the repair of the satellite. But this mission also brought a major disappointment. 2 communications satellites were launched from the cargo bay. Then their booster rockets misfired. The $40 million satellites were stranded in space. Until the booster problem could be solved, the shuttle would carry no more satellites into orbit. In the meantime, April's mission was the most dramatic ever attempted, the repair of Solar Max. At the bottom of this picture, astronaut George Nelson is trying to lock on to the satellite to stop it from spinning with bursts of gas from his jet backpack. But the locking mechanism failed to work.
You're going to have to hold on to it both hands, I imagine.
Okay, think about it, Trip. I don't know if I'm going to have enough gas to do that.
Nelson left empty-handed.
Okay, we've got it, and we're in the process of putting in the FSF. Outstanding.
Finally, success. The crippled satellite's own thrusters were used to stop the spinning. Then the cargo arm hauled Solar Max in. The satellite was launched in 1980 to gather valuable information on the sun. But 9 months later, it stopped working. For more than 3 years, it drifted uselessly in space. Now, George Nelson and James von Hoften would try to bring Solar Max back to life.
All these screws are coming out just great. Sure, there's no problem at all.
That's good to hear.
Like skilled surgeons, they cut through the satellite's insulation, carefully removing screws and connectors and cutting through wires.
Okay, that comes the hard part of getting these other little...
Finally, they reached a broken scientific instrument and replaced it with a new one. After 6 hours, the patient was put back together. The operation was a success. Solar Max was set free and immediately began sending back new information on the sun. The repair bill was $50 million, but it saved a $200 million satellite. Man's unique brain and hands had proven themselves here in the vacuum of space. The Shuttle Discovery was launched for the first time in September 1984. Engineers believed the satellite booster problem was now solved, and 3 new communications satellites were inside the cargo bay. Never before had so many hopes been riding on a single mission. One after another, the 3 satellites were launched into perfect orbits. With this success, the much-delayed shuttle program was back on the track. The way had now been cleared for the most ambitious flight schedule yet, the launching of 1 shuttle a month for the foreseeable future. Next, the giant panel of solar cells was unrolled from the cargo bay. reaching as high as a 10-story building. A panel like this one could power a space station of the future by converting sunlight into electricity. That was no idle dream. President Reagan was now proposing an $8 billion space station to be launched within 10 years. A space station could save many lives by turning out rare medicines that are almost impossible to make in Earth's gravity. Here on Discovery's first mission, McDonnell Douglas engineer Charles Walker operates an electrophoresis chamber, manufacturing a new drug that holds promise for millions of people. In the future, miracle drugs produced in space could bring new treatments for diabetes, heart disease, and other serious ailments. November 1984 brought one of the most spectacular events since man walked on the moon. This was a rescue mission to save those two communications satellites that went astray earlier in the year. Ground controllers had slowly moved the satellites down to an orbit where the shuttle could reach them. Rendezvous at last. A special docking probe was inserted into the burned-out rocket motor of each satellite, and its spinning was brought to a stop. Now the satellite was floated across to the space shuttle a few hundred yards away. Once again, man had journeyed into the unknown and proven himself. Dale Gardner and Joseph Allen manhandled the 1,200-pound satellites, moving them into the cargo bay, attaching mounting brackets, and then locking them down for the return trip to Earth. Later, the satellites would be fixed up and launched again, regaining up to $50 million for their insurance companies. Like a covered wagon, the space shuttle had opened the gateway to this new frontier. Ahead lay an exciting future. From the cargo bay, a space telescope would be set free to open our eyes to the universe. Galileo would be launched on a mission to Jupiter. And working together, man and shuttle could build a permanent station in space. For the space shuttle, many technical challenges remained. Would the ship hold up for 100 trips into space without expensive repairs? Would the shuttle pay its own way? And could the number of flights be increased? So far, the road had been long and hard, but the journey was a satisfying one. The shuttle had proven itself. The shuttle had made America proud.